engine room is standing by. Main engines are warm, puffing ahead.
We were surrounded by sea ice. It was minus 15 degrees outside. We were packed in the control room, about to do a dive that submariners rarely do, straight down. And the Navy's nuclear power submarine I found myself on started tilting. If that tilt angle got too steep, you'd risk a situation that is much harder to recover from. Ships have sunk to the bottom of the ocean.
Stand by for impact. Standing by.
5-6
Impact.
But wait, what was I doing in a Los Angeles class nuclear powered submarine underneath 10 feet of sea ice in the Arctic Ocean?
Ah, physics girl.
Hello.
Good to meet you.
Well, in case you're new here, I'm Diana, you're watching Physics Girl, and earlier this past winter, I spent 2 nights on an ice camp 160 miles from civilization. My last video describes why peeing in the middle of the night at an Arctic ice camp is so terrifying. But the whole reason we were there was to go on a nuclear-powered submarine for these exercises that the Navy only does every 2 years.
This is real. We are in a submarine in the Arctic Ocean and we're going under.
And they invited us along to ask questions. Let's dive into it. But the things that I really want to show you are, 1, what was it like to dive surrounded by Arctic sea ice? The officers on board told me that the stationary dive we were going to do was much harder than a normal dive, and I got the sense that it was more dangerous. 2, how do submarines even work? Standing there in the submarine, about to fully submerge underwater and sleep there overnight.
Excuse me, sorry.
I realized I didn't know. Is there compressed air that they put into the tanks or something? Where does it go? How fast do they sink? How well can they control this 6,000-ton vessel? 3, we learned the submarine weighed 50,000 pounds more than anyone expected on their first resurfacing. So they had to go through some of those complications when we resurfaced. And finally, the story of why the military yelled at me as we disembarked from our frozen B&B, and why the military probably doesn't invite YouTubers to their nuclear submarines too often.
It's probably about 20 more minutes and you guys will be ready to go down and have a cup of coffee and enjoy your day.
Let's rewind a bit though. To get to this submarine, we had to cross, that line on your Google Maps that separates land from ocean, and fly with the Royal Canadian Air Force and land on a floating ice camp that is floating. And I mean floating because when you walk around in a circle, your GPS tracks spirals because the ice beneath your feet is slowly moving.
Levi, we have moved 0.1 miles in the last 35 minutes.
So trippy. From that ice, you get on a helicopter for over an hour that plops you down on some more ice where you see nothing but endless ice with a little gray cylinder poking up through it. And you realize there are men walking around on that cylinder because that is the USS Pasadena, and it has just come up from a trip into the Beaufort Sea with 0 contact to the outside world and popped up through the Arctic sea ice to pick us up and dive 500 feet and sleep overnight and hopefully not die.
Across now, so that's what you're going to walk across to get in there. Carefully.
Because if you fall into this water,
You have a couple minutes, and we have a tent to rewarm you. And a doctor here just in case you fall in.
That's you.
Yeah.
If you fall in, who helps you? You?
Hector?
I think I'm not gonna have you film while you're walking across.
They're gonna put a handrail up, so you'll be able to hold on to a handrail.
They didn't put a handrail.
Don't look straight down. Just keep on walking, okay? No tripping.
I cannot express to you how much I had to focus on left foot, right foot, and these visions of 28-degree water soaking into my down coat and the 5 layers of clothing that I had underneath my laptop, my phone, my headphones, my dignity.
I'm good. Thank you guys so much.
It got really quiet.
Right.
Oh my gosh. That is the scariest wide plank I've ever walked.
I hadn't seen land for 3 days, and we were about to disappear even further from civilization once the submarine dived underneath the surface.
Got it.
I was about to learn a lot about how submarines dive and how what we were about to do was seriously different from how submarines normally dive.
I intend to stationary dive the ship to 180 feet.
Stationary dive. Stationary dive.
They kept repeating stationary dive. This was the first thing I realized I didn't know about submarines. They almost never drop straight down, and for good reason.
Give you a heads up warning, that's what we're doing. There will be some jostling of the ship and a little bit of angles that you see. Nothing too severe, but...
The captain warned us what to expect because instead of driving forward and letting moving water flow across the boat and across what are called diving planes, the same way that air flowing over airplane wings controls the altitude, we had to drop straight down for a pretty clear reason.
So normally we'll go about 8 or so knots as we're diving, and we'll kind of glide down. But with ice in front of us and behind us and all around us, we run into an ice keel.
And that's why diving in Arctic water required a lot more control using the ballast to sink the sub. And I think our captain mentioned he'd only had to do a dive like this once or twice before because usually there's no reason to do it. And it's a lot harder to keep the submarine level this way, so it's more risky. But danger is my middle name. Diana's just my first name.
Stationary dive. Control maneuver guide.
Half vent shut. Open vent.
Stationary dive. Stationary dive.
Open forward vents, Doctor. Open forward vents. Open forward vents. Forward vents open.
I think we were at like 14 degrees or something, and it stayed like that for a long time. And we were just like standing at that angle, not knowing what was going on.
Open that vents. Opening half vents. Half vents open. Shut half vents. Shutting half vents. Half vents shut.
Something was happening, and we weren't given a lot of information at the time. Maybe they didn't know exactly, but the captain later explained to us a couple reasons why the process took extra long.
And what you saw yesterday was new for us. It was actually new for the Arctic Operations Specialist. And every time we do this, we learn something new. We had a significant amount of ice that was built up on our forward main ballast tank vents. And so when we did the venting of the forward tanks, not as much air escaped that normally escapes.
And it's not that the ice would ever freeze the vent shut, which was a concern of mine, but they assured me that the hydraulic vents are relatively fail-safe, but that ice can block some of where the air is supposed to come out, and that slows the process quite a bit. Again, an issue you don't have to deal with when you're not in the Arctic. One more thing I learned that kind of messed with my mind. When the submarine is at an angle, one thing that they have to take into consideration is that the forward and rear ballasts are now at different pressures in the water, which made sense to me. I have scuba dived, and you know that the further down you go in the water, the pressure increases. But could the pressure be that different between the front and the end? Well, the submarine is about 360 feet long, so at a 20-degree angle, the difference is 120 feet of depth from one end to the other. That's 3.5 atmospheres of difference. So we're talking tens of thousands of pounds. The end lower in the water now has less buoyancy, so you have to take that into account. So that end doesn't keep accelerating down faster than the other end. And that's why I was worried about getting to too steep of an angle. But I was told that it would have to be an extreme angle for you to worry about this. And they wouldn't give me a number because it's probably classified. But our 14 degrees was not a big deal. And it was at this point that I realized I had no idea how ballast tanks worked because I didn't know if they were closed off to the ocean. This kind of effect would only matter if the submarine shrinks when it goes down or if water is free to flow in and out of the ballasts. But that can't be how submarines work, right? Wrong. But first, a quick sponsor message. Thank you to 3M for supporting Physics Girl and sponsoring this video. Have you ever wondered how they make cars quieter and give the doors that solid thunk sound when they close? We talk about how life-changing technology is all around us, but there's some tech that you might not even know is there. And you couldn't know because you can't see it. It's literally in the walls. Well, I recently visited the 3M Innovation Center at their headquarters in St. Paul to check out some of this cool technology. I have two identical gongs here and I'm going to hit them, but one of them has duct tape on it and the other one has a mystery tape. Here's the duct tape gong first. And here's the gong with the mystery tape. What is this? I swear these are identical gongs, but what is this mystery tape? Well, it's called vibration damping tape. It's thinner than duct tape, but it's made of this mix of aluminum and a viscoelastic material, and it absorbs the vibrations of the metal so that they can't become sound as much. It's so weird. Noise damping tape is just one of thousands of innovations 3M has pioneered that's relevant to me. It's in our cars, it's in airplanes. 3M science is all around us, and their goal is to improve all aspects of our lives through science. From creating tape that makes our trips and our commutes quieter and more enjoyable, to helping solve bigger problems like climate change. 3M is constantly innovating to better all of our lives every day. You probably have 3M products within arm's length of you right now. Thank you to 3M for helping make this video possible, and now back to the Arctic. This is how submarines work. They obviously have to change the buoyancy of the submarine because submarines are built a lot like boats, so they will float. So then how do you make them sink? You have to change the density or the weight by filling parts of the submarine with water. Now I know we're thinking the same thing. So how do they bring water safely into the submarine? Well, they have these compartments called ballast tanks, and they literally flood the compartments to dive, which makes sense. Add water, you get heavier, and then blow out the water using compressed air in order to surface. But where are the tanks? When you're standing in the living quarters, you start wondering, where are they letting water into? Well, almost the entire hull is a tank. It's the main ballast tank that travels across the entire length of the submarine, outlining the hull, and that entire thing gets flooded when the submarine dives, and then there are additional tanks at various other points to more finely control the buoyancy and the tilt angle and so forth. Those are called trim tanks. Now those tanks are completely closed off from the ocean and are adjusted using compressed air. The other main ballast giant tank across the whole hull is open to the ocean on the bottom. There's a grid or something that keeps out, I don't know, dolphins or jellyfish probably. But it turns out that those main ballast tanks are not affected by your depth because they're completely flooded with water when you dive anyways. What is affected is that the submarine hull significantly shrinks when you go to deep depths, even though it's made of high yield strength steel. So the submariners have to adjust tens of thousands of pounds of water in and out of those trim tanks to deal with the shrinkage. Whew. And that's how submarines work. I also learned about other parts of the submarine.
The part up there where they're standing next to the periscope, that thing sticking out is the periscope.
I see.
That's actually where you stand when the boat's underway in the middle of the ocean.
Gotcha.
The periscope itself has a speed limit because when the water's coming over it, but if the fairing's up, you can go a little bit faster.
Got it.
So it's just kind of more rigidity, more support.
Well, yeah.
But the sail, that part of the sail is always up.
I was also learning to talk like a sailor.
Well, this is an incredible place to learn about a submarine.
So after a somewhat nerve-wracking process of submerging beneath the Arctic Ocean, we were ready for the coolest sleepover ever. Before we knew it, it was time to return to land, or I guess more solid water. The crew found a place to come up through the ice. How they did that? I have no clue. It was classified. Well, okay, I have some clue.
Up here in the Arctic, it's a little bit different. We have to actually find relatively thinner parts of the ice to map out. So we'll drive around essentially using all of our data that we can collect to look up with our sonar and visually with the camera to see what is above us.
Yeah.
So once that meets, we have preset ice thicknesses and dimensions of the feature itself that we have to meet. If I hover over here, I hear more like crackling on the ice, and down here is more running water.
Turns out it's not just diving in the Arctic that's tricky. Surfacing is also a lot more complicated because it's one of the only places in the world that a submarine is punching up through a crystalline inorganic solid.
Vertically surfacing, we're getting an angle on the submarine about 4 degrees so that all the force is concentrated on the tip top of the sail. So all the hundreds and thousands of pounds of upward buoyancy we have is concentrated on one very specific point in the ice and just cracks it. So
They have to essentially use the sail like a battering ram against the ice to break through using just the speed that they get from increasing their buoyant force without any forward motion at all. But the captain explained to me that in the Arctic, they might have to deal with the submarine unexpectedly weighing 50,000 pounds more than it should.
what we saw yesterday was it didn't match what we expected. Basically, like I said, about a 50,000 pound change in buoyancy as we were surfacing. The other day,
Wait, hold on.
50,000 pounds.
50,000 pounds? And obviously, you're not adding 50,000 pounds worth of people.
No.
Changes in the buoyancy of the sub made it 50,000 pounds heavier than they expected. What would cause that?
When we surfaced the day before, our buoyancy, as we were going up, we got heavier and heavier and heavier just due to the fact that the salinity changed and the temperature changed.
No kidding.
So as we're going up, we're actually blowing water out of our tanks just to keep an upward velocity.
So because they're ascending in the Arctic, where the temperature at the surface can be drastically different than it is underwater, and the salinity of the water changes due to the presence of, the freshwater ice at the top, you get just unpredictable buoyancy. And over the length of a 362-foot submarine, turns out that can mean a difference of tens of thousands of pounds.
If we start getting lighter or heavier, that's going to change. We can accelerate or we can decelerate and stall out. Stalling out's bad because then we don't bust through the ice. Accelerating's bad because we go too fast and we can do some damage.
So even in an unpredictable environment, it's essential for them to get their ascent rate just right. And that's part of why we were there at all. And then, bam, we broke through the ice. Actually, it was pretty uneventful.
Stand by for impact. Standing by. 60 feet, 10 degrees up, 0.56 up. Impact. Impact, die.
I think you slept through it.
I think I slept through the whole thing.
So when you board a nuclear submarine, the way you have to behave is uptight. You just do what everyone tells you to do. You ask questions respectfully, and not just out of respect, because these men are literally in charge of your survival in an extremely hostile environment.
Where are you from, sir?
I'm from Texas. All right.
So when you've just broken through the ice and they tell you, Diana, climb up the top of the sail to get that drone shot you wanted, you obey. Yeah, I was pretty excited. But then something happened and I got my first real orders. So Levi, who's a licensed drone pilot, breaks out the drone, and something about drones is that they often have a set distance from the takeoff location that they'll allow you to fly. That way you can't fly the drone out of range. And it calculates this distance mostly based on GPS. But as we saw back at the ice camp, when you're standing on ice, the GPS shows that you're moving because the ice is moving. Now, our dream shot was to get a drone up to see me standing on top of the sail, but we were told drone batteries only have a few minutes out in the extreme cold. Some personnel even tried to use their own drone at the ice camp and it just fell out of the sky. But we were determined. We just had to move quickly. Now, seconds after I got to the top of the submarine and seconds before Levi got the drone up to see me, I started getting yelled at by the military personnel from the ice camp down on the ice. They're like, get off the boat now. And I turned to one of the men on the sail with me and told him that a minute before the captain himself had told me to go up the sail. I had no idea what was going on, but it turned out the submarine was starting to move. And the ice was scraping against the hull, and there was danger that the exit plank was gonna fall into the ocean, and they still had one of the world's most prolific pun users on board. So we quickly had to grab all of our stuff, and I mean frantically shoving camera gear into anyone's backpacks, and they rushed me off the sub, and I had to walk the plank of death again. But this time, I had a smile on my face, I had a DSLR safely in my hand, not in the ocean. Except, missing out on our dream shot by mere seconds was not even the worst part. You may recall from earlier the importance of GPS for drones in the Arctic. The ice had moved far enough that the drone would not return from the other side of the submarine. You can even see in the earlier part of the shot how the drone won't cross the water, but if we speed it up just a few moments later in the clip, the drone now won't even get to the water. It's moving further away, and it has all of our footage from the trip on it, and it's about to crash land onto much thinner frozen sea ice. And the military told Levi there's no way the Navy was gonna rescue us rescuing the drone. So as I said goodbye to the most rare and unique footage we've ever captured, and the scientists had the idea to land the drone on the other side of the submarine on the ice, reset it, and then put it full speed back toward us. Levi was hesitant that it wouldn't take off again, but we were running out of time. The drone batteries were gonna die within minutes. After it landed, it was able to take off again. Levi hit the throttle full speed and it came flying over the sub. Tried to stop over the water again, but our hero, Anne, grabbed it out of the air and saved the day. We got our drone back, we got to keep our awesome footage, minus me at the top of the sail, but we were really close to losing it. And it makes you think about how quickly things can go wrong in the Arctic. I mean, we just had a few pieces of equipment to keep track of, and such a minor kink almost caused a huge issue, and that's just for a drone. I can't imagine having to do checks on the submarine and be responsible for keeping people alive in such a harsh environment. It was so cool to see these guys and how they live and get to experience just a piece of that for a moment. But it was also intense to know that they experience, you know, isolation from their families and from the world, and they don't hear anything for weeks, sometimes months at a time. So if you want to hear more about my experience sleeping on the submarine and learn more about the cool tech that I didn't get a chance to cover in this video, like, you know, the nuclear reactor, and more about what life is like on a submarine, make sure to stay tuned and check out my upcoming videos all about what it's like to sleep on a submarine and how submarines get around. Hint, it's not GPS. Thank you so much for watching, and happy physicsing.